a lot of my friends who are conservative, you're a hero to them. We're from California, so people love you, admire you, adore you, and hate you. From the other side, they hate you. Obviously, you saw what the LA Times article called you the what? What did they call you?
Blackface
of white supremacy. Rob, if you can kind of pull up this LA Times article. But then I saw
Erica D. Smith are her initials. Oops.
Yeah, and then I saw the article, one that said, I think you were married in 92 and then divorced in 94, and the story is she wanted to have kids, you didn't want to have kids.
Right.
And you've never had kids. Right. Why a man with your kind of values, your passion for America, your conservative values, why didn't you have kids?
At the time, I didn't want them. One of my regrets in life is that I should have. Now I'm 71 and think it's too late. But at the time, I didn't. I mean, I was 25 years old at one time. I'm not that age anymore. And when I was younger, I think what happened is when I was younger, I really intensely disliked my father. I've written a book about it called Dear Father, Dear Son, 2 Lives, 8 Hours. My father used to spank us really hard with a belt. My brothers and I both disliked him. And now I'm 25 years old, and I sat down and had a conversation with my dad, not having really spoken to him for almost 10 years. And I told him how much I disliked him when I was growing up, how mean I thought he was, how angry I thought he was for silly reasons. And my dad and I had a conversation I thought was going to last for 5 or 10 minutes. It ended up lasting for 8 hours.
Wow.
And during that 8-hour conversation, I found out that my father never knew his biological father. My last name, Elder, is not the name of his biological father. And I said, I'm 25 years old now. I said, well, Dad, who was your father? He says, I have no idea. You never met your dad? No. Who is Elder? Elder was the name of a guy who was in my life the longest. He was an alcoholic who used to beat up my mother, and when I tried to stop him, he'd beat me up. My dad said, then I came home at the age of 13, and I started quarreling with my mom's then boyfriend. Elder was long gone. And the mother sided with the boyfriend and threw my father out of the house, never to return. 13-year-old black boy, Athens, Georgia, Jim Crow South at the beginning of the Great Depression. For the next 8 hours, my dad just told me about his life. He became a Pullman porter in the trains. That's how he ended up in California. This is before the war, before the Second World War. My dad was blown away. You could walk through the front door of a restaurant in California, in LA, and get served. He always had crackers and 10 cans of tuna because he never knew in the South if he'd be able to get a meal. So my dad made a mental note, maybe someday I'll relocate to California. Pearl Harbor, my dad joined the Marines. I asked him why. If there are any Marines out there, I'm going to say 2 reasons. They go where the action is, and my dad said, I love the uniforms. So he's stationed on Guam, and when the war is over, he goes to Chattanooga, Tennessee, where he met and married my mom to get him a job as a cook. My dad was in charge of cooking for the colored soldiers. And he was told, we don't hire niggers. He goes to an unemployment office. Lady says, you went to the wrong door. My dad goes out, sees colored only, goes to that door to the very same lady who sent him out. My dad came home with my mom and said, this is BS. I'm going to L.A., get me a job as a cook, and I'll send for you. So he goes to L.A. He walks around, and he's told, you don't have any references. My dad said, I need references to make ham and eggs. And my dad offered to work for free for a reference. They wouldn't even do that. So they treated him the same way in L.A. as they did in Chattanooga, maybe a little more polite. He goes to an unemployment office, this time just one door. Lady says, I have nothing. My dad says, what time do you open? She says, 9. What time do you close? She says, 5. My dad said, I'll be sitting in that chair. Do you have something? My dad sat in a chair for a whole day, came back the next day, sat there for half a day. She calls him up. I have something. I don't know if you're going to want it. My dad said, of course I'm going to want it. I'm starting a family. What is it? And she said, it's a job cleaning toilets at Nabisco brand bread. My dad did that for over 10 years, took a second full-time job cleaning at another bread company, cleaning toilets, cooked for a family on the weekend because he wanted my mom to be a stay-at-home mom. And he went to night school to get his GED. And then when he got his GED, he went to night school to learn how to operate a small restaurant. The man never slept. Wow. 5 minutes here, 15 minutes here, 20 minutes here, half hour here. Not day after day, not week after week, not month after month, but year after year, which was why he was so grouchy. So as my dad is telling me this, my dad's getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and I'm getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And now I'm crying. And I apologize to my father for having such a harsh view towards him. And he said, there's nothing to apologize for. You just didn't know. My father said, just follow the advice I've always given you and your brothers. Hard work wins. You get out of life what you put into it. Larry, you cannot control the outcome, but you are 100% in control of the effort. And before you moan or groan about what someone did to you or said to you, go to the nearest mirror, look at it, and say to yourself, what could I have done to change the outcome? And finally, my dad said this, no matter how hard you work, how good you are, sooner or later, bad things are going to happen to you. How you deal with those bad things will tell your mother and me if we raised a man. I was 25 years old when I had that conversation with him. For the next 35 years, he and I were the best of friends. I wrote a book called Dear Father, Dear Son, 2 Lives, 8 Hours, about that 8-hour conversation. And it's changed people's lives. I get letters all over the world from people telling me that it changed that.
So
Ingrained in me was I never wanted to have a child that felt the way I felt about my dad. And that was just in me. And it took a while for that to go away. By the way, my brothers both married women who had kids. And they both wanted to have kids. And I had the opposite reaction to my dad, as my brothers did. Let me tell you something real quickly about my mom. My mom was born on a farm in Huntsville, Alabama. And my mom was a lifelong Democrat. My dad was a lifelong Republican. And you should have been a fly on the wall to hear some of the arguments. But nobody called anybody a fascist. Nobody called anybody a Nazi. Nobody said you only care about the rich, you don't care about the poor. They were able to argue aggressively, passionately, but nobody demeaned anybody. And why we can't do that in this country, to me, is a real problem. And when I become president, I think I'm going to be able to change the tone of America so we can have discussions like this, like we're having here, civilly, without anybody calling anybody a fascist or a Nazi. My mother told my brothers and me, nobody can make you feel inferior without your permission. And so one day I'm in high school and I'm taking a course called African American Studies. If you know me, you've never heard me use the term African American to describe myself. I don't. I'm an American who's black. I don't like the term African American. The name of the course was African American Studies, so I'm just telling you what the name of the course was. So we read a poem by a guy named County Cullen. And it goes like this. While riding through old Baltimore, so small and full of glee, I saw a young Baltimorean keep a looking straight at me. Now, I was young and very small, and he was no whit bigger, and so I smiled, but he poked out his tongue and called me nigger. I saw the whole of Baltimore from May until September. Of all the things that happened there, that's all that I remember. Teacher was pissed. My class was all black. She talked about how this was going to make the kid always feel inferior. He was going to always have a permanent stain in his psyche. He'll never feel part of the American family. She was pissed. The class was pissed. I was pissed. So I'm walking home, and I knew my mom was going to have a different reaction to the poem, although I didn't know what it was going to be. So I walk into the house, and she's frying chicken wings, my favorite, and stirring a big pot of greens on the stove. I said, Mom, we read a poem in class. I want to get your reaction to it. She said, what is it? I said, it goes like this. While riding through old Baltimore, so small and full of glee, I saw a young Baltimorean keep a looking straight at me. Now, I was young and very small, and he was no whit bigger, and so I smiled. But he poked out his tongue and called me nigger. I saw the whole of Baltimore from May until September. Of all the things that happened there, that's all that I remember. My mom took the spoon out of the pot, hit it on the side, and said, Larry, what a darn shame he allowed something like that to spoil his vacation. How many wings do you want? And that's
God, and your mom's a Democrat.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
But she was a Kennedy-type Democrat. My mom, by the way, because of me, began voting Republican. She voted for George W. Bush twice. And her position was the Democratic Party left me. I didn't leave the Democratic Party. She never changed her registration. My mom was a pro-gun person, Second Amendment person. She grew up with guns. She was pro-life. My dad was pro-life. My mom, strong national security. And she thought Democrats just became just crazy. So I think that's how Robert Kennedy feels, I think, about his party as well right now, Robert Kennedy Jr.